All right, welcome back. Since you are going to be controlled at the end of the day by your emotions, take a look at some of the things that are already manifesting as negative emotions and feelings, and then begin to get ready to deal with them. First of all, it's important that you note that no matter what kind of addiction, no matter how embarrassing, in quote, no matter how the stigma that has been placed on your kind of lifestyle, no matter what people have told you, no matter how people have painted it, I wish I could bring you to the place where you realize that you are not the worst person on earth, and your case is not irredeemable, your situation is not irreparable. In fact, that's why we're here, because the power to decide what you want is there with you, just to show you how to wield it, and then you can now ultimately decide if this is what you want or you want something better. So you're not the worst person on earth. Matter of fact, slavery, being a slave of a lifestyle, being a slave to something that seemed to be higher than you, whether real or imagined, being enslaved is a necessity for the human condition at the end of it all, because the invisible controls the visible. And even though human beings, we are both invisible, we're spirits, and we are visible, we're bodies, because of most of us have not developed our spiritual consciousness, we are enslaved by a lot of things in the physical realm. And even when you develop your spiritual consciousness, that development is such that you are supposed to decide what enslaves you. Because the invisible controls the visible must continue to enslave itself, submit itself to the slavery of higher invisible powers and forces for it to be able to dominate the physical realm. It is the reason why, if you are not submitted to a higher power, you will continue to be a slave in the physical realm. The onus is on all people, everybody, to decide what enslaves them. Sad enough, for a lot of factors, including our upbringing and exposure, many of us become enslaved to things that ought to be inferior to us, ought to be less than us. Even the angels, God said He created us superior to angelic beings. Meaning that when we allow ourselves to be enslaved to any other thing but God, it becomes an aberration, it becomes a disappointment, it becomes unfortunate, because it means we are being enslaved by things that we are superior to because of our inability to discover ourselves. So slavery is a human factor. It's just about who are you enslaving to, who are you enslaving to. God becomes jealous when His creature is enslaving to something else that is also a creature like that creature. So taking it one step further from there, now that slavery is a necessity for the human condition, everybody at the end of the day is enslaved to something. One of the biggest enemies you will have to deal with as you position yourself to break free from an addiction is this particular feeling that you are the worst person on earth. This particular negative feeling of unworthiness. This feeling that your situation is irredeemable. This feeling, you got to deal with it. You got to fight it. You got to switch it. You got to master it and gain control over it, because no matter your condition, you are not inferior. No matter your condition, you are not unworthy. No matter your condition and what you're battling with, you are not less than who God says that you are. You know, a lot of the times, this feeling, which just requires simple emotional intelligence, comes from we comparing ourselves with other people that we think are better than us. The mistake is because we listen to other people, we hear them talk, we hear them condemn us, we hear them make light of us, because they tend to portray themselves like they don't have the weakness that we are battling with, or like they are perfect, they've never hurt a fly before. And then the way they talk to us, at us and over our heads, begin to make us feel less than them. You know, you're struggling with a lifestyle, somebody comes around and is like, he has never had this challenge before. He has always been on top of his game. Excuse me. The same person might be enslaved by something else. Therefore, it doesn't make him better than you. Listen, even people, listen, there is nobody who does not have a weight and a sin that easily beset them. So don't ever compare yourselves or feel inferior to anybody. Even if you find somebody that appears not to have any such besetting weakness or sin, trust me, it is simply that they have overcome their own over time. And if they can overcome theirs over time, then you also have everything it takes to also overcome. What pains me oftentimes is that these people who have overcome theirs will not come out and tell their stories so that the rest of us can learn. Instead, they will be so judgmental and segregating and stigmatizing like they never passed that route before. But this is not okay. This is not okay. They act like they never ought to fly all their lives. And what this does is that it makes you feel something is incredibly insane about you. But this is not true. Even Jesus Christ, when he was killed like a criminal. He was disgraced. Nobody on earth will ever again face that level of humiliation, disgrace, embarrassment. You know what it means to be killed naked? Forget about them rags they're putting on his waist in movies and pictures. He had to be naked to be qualified to save human beings, no matter what those human beings are going through. The Bible said no matter what anybody has ever or will ever go through, Jesus went through it to save them. Jesus was subjected to the highest level of humiliation, embarrassment, disgrace, stigmatization that can be imagined. And even when he came back from that level of embarrassment, he went everywhere. Instead of looking for artificial means to cover the scars of wound on his hands and on his feet and on his side, Jesus went everywhere showing those who cared to see his wounded sides, his wounded hands, his wounded feet. He was showing his scars. He was displaying his wounds. Why is it that those of us who battle with life and become victors prefer to hide our wounds? Because at the end of the day, what Jesus did shows that there really is no victor without scars. As a person, I struggled with addictions even as a pastor. Of course, yes, the affliction started, the exposure started before I was 10 years old and graduated by the time I became a teenager, but I battled with it until I was called into the ministry, until I was ordained, till I got married. I was still battling with these addictive lifestyles until I received light that helped me to break free, which story is what I'm sharing. I tell my story because telling it and showing others the way deals a fatal blow to the circles and patterns that enslaved me, and then it reinforces my victory. And this is so important, a strategy for retaining victory. This is so important. Don't also forget that whenever you set out to end an affliction, the devil is going to intensify the warfare around you. That's another challenge that you are going to deal with. The warfare around you will be intensified. The devil will bring up more tempting situations, circumstances, and people around you to ensure that it makes it difficult or impossible for you to break free. It's going to increase temptations and exposures to your pitfalls, especially in unguarded moments. Now, you will realize the possibility is that as you begin to fight addiction, maybe 1 week you will notice that you have been free from it, 1 week, 1.5, 2 weeks, and you're so excited, you're so exhilarated, you're so joyful, you're telling your stories, and then something just happens and you fall back into that addiction after making some reasonable progress. By default, what that will lead to is an avalanche of negative feelings. That feeling of failure, I'm warning you ahead of time, that feeling of failure, that feeling of grief, that feeling of depression, that feeling of guilt, of regret, and of self-condemnation. When these emotions invade your space, trust me, if you don't understand the things I'm sharing in this model, they're going to overwhelm you and they're going to make you give up. They're going to suggest to you that maybe it's not time for you to be free. Maybe it's not time for you to even bother yourself with being a Christian or not a Christian, being moral or not moral, being ethical or not ethical. It'll suggest to you that, listen, don't struggle with these things. When it is time, you will not be struggling like this. So just you live your life, be free till when it is time. Those are the deceptions of the devil. They are the deceptions that these negative emotions are going to bring your way. And oftentimes, they are going to be overwhelming depending on who you are listening to, depending on what you are listening to, depending on what you're saying to yourself and who you are allowing to speak into your life. But the key point here is that you must understand how to deal with this. Your ability to deal with them is going to be profound in defining your outcome. Stay with me, and I will be right back to guide you further.